I stared at the bank statement on my phone, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. The number staring back at me, $847,000, was gone. Just like that. 10 minutes ago, I'd initiated the wire transfer to what I thought was our joint investment account. 10 minutes ago, I was still Michael Harrison, successful enough to take care of my family. Now, I was Michael Harrison, the guy who just got played by his own wife. But let me back up. This didn't start today. 3 years ago, when I first met Emma at that charity gala downtown, I was living what I'd call the dream. I'm 42 now, but I was 39 then, VP of Sales at Meridian Tech, pulling in just over $300,000 a year, plus bonuses that pushed it north of $400,000 on good years. The job was demanding, sure, but I loved the grind. I'd worked my ass off since college to get here, and every achievement felt earned. My first marriage to Rebecca had ended 5 years before I met Emma. No kids, thankfully. Rebecca didn't want them, and honestly, I'd been so focused on climbing the ladder that I hadn't pushed the issue. The divorce was clean, amicable even. We just grew apart. She got the condo in Portland. I got the house in the suburbs here in Seattle, a 3-bedroom colonial with the perfect yard, the kind of place that screams, "I've made it." The mortgage was manageable, the equity was solid, life was simple. Then Emma walked into that ballroom in a navy dress that fit like it was made for her, and everything got complicated in the best way possible. She was stunning, obviously. Long blonde hair, the kind of smile that made you forget you were holding a glass of overpriced wine. But what got me wasn't just her looks, it was how she listened. When I told her about my work, about the pressure of managing a team of 40 people, about the quarterly targets that never seemed to get any easier, she actually heard me. She laughed at the right moments, asked real questions, didn't just nod and look for the next guy with a bigger title. "You work too hard," she said to me that night, her hand on my arm as we stood on the terrace overlooking the city. "You should let someone take care of you for once." I should have noticed that line was rehearsed, should have caught the way her eyes calculated something behind that smile. But I was lonely, and she was beautiful, and she seemed to understand me in a way Rebecca never had. We dated for 6 months before I asked her to move in. She was working as a nanny at that time, took care of 2 kids, ages 4 and 7, for a family named the Hendersons out in Medina. Good people, she said. The kids adored her. She was patient, organized, great with the household management side of things. "I want to focus on us," she said when I suggested she could quit. "I want to build something real with you, Michael." I proposed 4 months later. Not my most rational decision, but I was happy. Actually, genuinely happy. The wedding was small. My parents, her sister, a few friends from work. We got married at the courthouse and had dinner at this upscale Italian place in Capitol Hill. Emma wore a cream-colored dress and cried happy tears when I slipped the ring on her finger. The first year was perfect. She decorated the house with this warm, inviting aesthetic that made it feel like a home instead of just a place I slept. She learned to cook, really cook, not just heating up takeout. And Friday nights became this thing where I'd come home and there'd be fresh pasta and candles and her in a nice dress. She was attentive, affectionate, interested in my day. My work life was firing on all cylinders too. I got promoted to senior VP, which came with a $150,000 raise and a corner office on the 32nd floor. That bump let me pay down the mortgage faster. We started talking about maybe getting a vacation property somewhere warm, Mexico maybe, or the Bahamas. Emma suggested we refinance the house and open a joint investment account, something about diversifying assets and building wealth together. I should have paid closer attention to the details, but my financial advisor said it made sense. She had documents drawn up, all legit looking. I signed them, barely skimming the paperwork. That was my first real mistake. The second year was when things started to shift, so subtly I almost missed it. Emma began spending more time on her phone. She'd tell me she was texting her sister or catching up with friends, and I believed her. She was less affectionate, not in a way that screamed affair or anything obvious like that, but more distant. When I tried to initiate sex, she'd say she was tired or had a headache. She stopped cooking as much and started suggesting we order in. "You're working so hard," she'd say. "Let's just relax." And I'd relax. I'd order Thai food and we'd watch TV, and I'd tell myself this was normal, that every marriage goes through phases. That's what you do. You ride out the phases. But then the real crack appeared. I came home one Wednesday evening around 6 o'clock. The house was quiet. Emma's car was in the driveway, so she was home. I called out for her as I set my briefcase down by the door. "In the bedroom," she called back. I went upstairs and found her packing a suitcase. Not frantically, not in anger, just methodically folding clothes and laying them in the Samsonite. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice light even though my chest had just tightened. "Where are you going?" She didn't look at me. "My sister's in Portland. Family emergency. I need to go for a few days." That was a lie. I found out later that her sister was fine, but I didn't know that then. I just felt this cold feeling creeping up the back of my neck. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Everything's fine," she said, still not meeting my eyes. "I just need some space." She left the next morning before I woke up, leaving a note on the kitchen counter. "Taking some time to think. Don't worry, I'll call you soon." I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed in the dark, replaying our conversations, trying to figure out what I'd missed, what I'd done wrong. Had I been neglecting her? Was I too focused on work? The thoughts spiraled until dawn broke through the windows. She was gone for a week. When she came back, she seemed lighter somehow, like a decision had been made. She was affectionate again, interested in me again. We made love for the first time in months, and I felt like we were getting back on track. I never asked her directly where she'd really been. I told myself I didn't want to know, that trusting her was more important than my own doubts. That was my second real mistake. The weeks that followed had a strange normalcy to them. Emma was good again, present again. We talked about taking that vacation to Cancun in the fall. She suggested we check our investment account to see how much we'd saved. I logged in online and saw $847,000 sitting there, growing steadily. "We're doing really well," she said, standing behind me at my desk, her hand on my shoulder. "See how smart we're being together?" I felt proud, felt like we were building something. This morning, she suggested I move some of our savings around. "Diversify a little more," she said. "I found this opportunity, a private equity fund that's showing incredible returns. We could really accelerate our timeline for the vacation property." I should have asked more questions, should have looked at the details more carefully. But it was 7 a.m. I had a meeting at 8:30, and she made it seem simple. "Just wire it to this account," she said, handing me a slip of paper with account numbers on it. I did it from my phone, standing in the kitchen with my coffee in hand. It took maybe 3 minutes. 10 minutes later, I got a notification from our actual investment account. A withdrawal request for $847,000. I logged in to stop it, but I was too late. The money was already gone. And that's when I called her. She didn't answer her phone. I called again. And again. Then I tried the landline. Nothing. I opened her closet and found it empty, not just of the clothes she'd been wearing, of everything. Her shoes were gone, her toiletries from the bathroom, the framed photo of her and her sister that had sat on her nightstand. That's when I realized something was catastrophically wrong. I called our bank, went through security questions, found out that 2 days ago, she'd requested a change of address on our accounts. She'd redirected statements to an email address I'd never seen before. The money wasn't in an investment account. It was gone. And then I did something I'm not proud of. I logged into her email, the personal one I'd seen her use 1,000 times, and whose password I knew because she'd written it on a post-it note months ago. I didn't think about privacy or trust or any of that ethical stuff. I just needed to understand what had happened. What I found made my blood go cold. Emails to someone named David Chen. Lots of them. Intimate ones. Plans being discussed. And then, buried in the threads, I found a message from 2 weeks ago. Once we have the money, we're clean. He won't be able to touch us. New identities, new start. You and me, just like we planned. I read that sentence maybe 20 times, waiting for my brain to make sense of it. It didn't. I sat down on the edge of the bed, our bed, and I couldn't remember how to breathe right. My vision went a little spotty. I'd been set up. Systematically, methodically set up by a woman I'd married, trusted completely, and made the beneficiary of my entire financial life. But here's the thing that nobody tells you about the moment your world collapses. It doesn't actually collapse all at once. It's not like an explosion. It's more like finding out the ground beneath you was always quicksand, and you're just now sinking. And I was still sinking. Because I didn't know yet that there was more. That the worst part wasn't the money at all. That the real play had happened months ago, and I was the last person to find out about it. My phone buzzed with a call from my boss, Richard. "Michael, where are you?" he asked, his voice tight. "We have a situation at the office." I couldn't form words. What kind of situation? "Just get here, now." I drove to Meridian Tech in a daze, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The city blurred past the windows. Rain had started falling, that cold Seattle rain that gets inside your bones. My phone kept buzzing. Richard, my mom, an unknown number. I ignored all of them. By the time I pulled into the underground garage, my shirt was soaked with sweat despite the cold. I took the elevator to the 32nd floor, and the moment the doors opened, I knew something catastrophic had happened. Security was standing by my office, 2 of them, and Richard was waiting in the hallway with his arms crossed, his face the color of old concrete. "Michael," he said, not meeting my eyes, "we need to go to my office, now." The walk felt like moving through water. Everything was slow and heavy. Inside his corner office, the one with the view of Elliott Bay that I'd always envied, there were 3 other people. Our chief financial officer, Patricia, someone from legal whose name I couldn't remember, and a man in an expensive suit who I'd never seen before. "Sit down," Richard said quietly. I sat. "About 40 minutes ago," Richard began, "we received a call from the SEC. They're opening an investigation into Meridian's accounts, specifically your accounts, and specifically related to fraudulent wire transfers and money laundering." The words didn't make sense. They were English words arranged in English order, but they didn't connect to anything in my brain. "What?" I managed. Patricia slid a folder across the desk. Inside were printouts of emails. My emails. Emails I'd never written. Emails from me, my account, my signature, to someone named David Chen, discussing how to move company funds into personal accounts. How to structure transfers to avoid detection. How to use offshore accounts in the Caymans. My stomach dropped through the floor. "These emails were sent from your work account over the past 18 months, the legal guy said. His voice was clinical, detached. "The IP addresses match your home network, your home computer, your home IP. "I didn't send those," I said. My voice sounded strange, far away. I would never." "Michael, your wife has access to your home network," Patricia said, and her tone wasn't unkind, which somehow made it worse. "She has access to your passwords. We found evidence that she's been using your credentials to send emails, initiate transfers." "Where is she?" I interrupted. No one answered. "Where is Emma?" My voice cracked on her name. Richard exchanged a look with the legal guy. "Her sister's name is Rebecca Chen, correct?" Everything froze. Rebecca Chen, I repeated slowly. No, her name is, I couldn't remember. I'd never actually met Emma's sister. Emma had said she lived in Portland. There were always excuses when I suggested a visit. Rebecca Chen is married to David Chen, the legal guy continued. They own a consulting firm in the Port of Seattle. They also have 3 shell companies registered in Delaware, 2 offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, and they've been systematically moving money through those accounts for approximately 2 years. I couldn't breathe. The room was tilting. The money in your joint investment account, Patricia said gently, wasn't your money, Michael. Well, it was, but it was being used as a staging account. Your wife, Emma Chen, not Emma Harrison, was using your identity and your credentials to facilitate money laundering for her sister's operation. We believe she married you specifically for access to your financial accounts and your position at this company. I stood up. I had to stand up or I was going to vomit right there on Richard's mahogany desk. That's not possible, I said. No. She married me because... But I couldn't finish that sentence. Because why? Because she loved me? I had no evidence of that. Not anymore. Not when I looked back at everything through this new, hideous lens. The SEC wants to interview you, the legal guy said. You're not under arrest, but you're a person of interest. We're going to need you to cooperate fully. Your home has likely been searched by now. Federal agents obtained a warrant this morning. Home. My colonial house with the perfect yard. Probably crawling with FBI right now, tearing through drawers, looking for evidence that I'd committed crimes I didn't commit, but had somehow enabled anyway. I want a lawyer, I said. We have one, Richard said quietly. Karen Rothstein. She's in the conference room. She's very good. The next 6 hours were a blur of questions and denials and confusion. Karen, a sharp woman in her 60s with gray hair and zero patience for my panic, went through everything with me. Every email, every account, every transaction. And with each one, I had to say the same thing. I didn't do this. Emma did. But here's the problem with that defense. It doesn't matter. When someone has access to your credentials, when they've signed documents using your authority, when they've operated in your name for 18 months, you're liable. You're responsible. The law doesn't care about intent when your signature is on the forms. By the time they finished with me, it was past 9 at night. I drove home slowly, dreading what I'd find. The front door had been unsealed, but police tape was everywhere. Inside, the house looked like a tornado had hit it. Drawers were open, papers scattered. The cushions on the couch were overturned. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was how empty it felt. Emma's things were gone, not just from the bedroom closet, but from everywhere. The kitchen didn't have her touch anymore. The photos she'd hung on the walls were down. It was like she'd been excised from the space, leaving only the hollow places where she'd been. I sat on the living room floor, the floor where we'd made love, where she'd cooked for me, where she'd convinced me she was the person I wanted to spend my life with. And I cried. Not quiet tears, full, body-shaking sobs that came from somewhere so deep inside me I didn't know it existed. My phone rang. My mother. I almost didn't answer, but I did. Michael, honey, I heard. Are you okay? We're so worried. Mom, I can't, I said, my voice raw. I can't talk about this right now. But if you need anything at all, you know I said I can't. I hung up. I sat in that empty house for hours. Didn't turn on the lights. Just sat in the dark and tried to understand how I'd been so thoroughly played. How I'd been so eager to believe in something good that I'd ignored every warning sign. How I'd let someone into the deepest parts of my life and given her access to the most important things, my money, my reputation, my future. By midnight, I was scrolling through old emails. Emails from Emma, Looking at them now, I could see the seams, the places where affection seemed calculated, the moments where she'd steered me toward financial decisions that benefited her, the careful way she'd built trust, brick by brick. That's when I found it, an email from 6 months ago, forwarded accidentally to our joint account instead of her personal one. From David Chen to Emma. The subject line was, payment schedule. Inside, he listed out what sounded like commission payments, $5,000 here, $8,000 there, money for each account opened, money for each transfer completed, money for maintaining cover. She'd been paid to marry me, paid to seduce me, paid to rob me blind. The amount at the bottom of the email made me gasp. $187,000. That's what her sister had paid her to destroy my life. $187,000. And I'd just wired her $847,000 more. I grabbed my laptop with shaking hands and pulled up our bank account. Then I searched for David Chen. It took 15 minutes, but I found him. A LinkedIn profile, a photo. A respectable-looking guy in his late 40s, wearing a suit, smiling at the camera like he hadn't just orchestrated the systematic theft of everything I'd built. Below his name, in his career summary, it said, Strategic Financial Consultant, specializing in wealth optimization and international asset management. Wealth optimization. That's what they called it. I was still staring at his face when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me. Mr. Harrison? A woman's voice, professional. My name is Detective Sarah Reeves with the FBI. We'd like to ask you some follow-up questions. Can we set up a time tomorrow morning? Yes, I said numbly. Yes, whenever. After I hung up, I sat in the dark for another hour. And that's when it hit me. Not the despair, that had been there the whole time, but something else, something cold and sharp and angry. They'd made a mistake. David Chen had made a mistake. He documented everything, every payment, every transaction, every instruction. And if there was one thing I knew how to do, it was follow a paper trail. I pulled up the email again. Then I searched for the offshore account numbers David had mentioned. I found bank statements. I found wire transfer confirmations. I found an entire digital trail of fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy that stretched back years. And I realized something else. They'd been so focused on framing me that they'd forgotten about the one advantage I had over them. I was the victim. I was the one the SEC wanted to talk to. I was the one with access to company resources and legal counsel. They'd stolen my money. They'd stolen my reputation. They'd stolen my future. But they'd left me with something they hadn't anticipated. Proof. And the cold, burning desire to make sure they paid for every single dollar. I pulled out my phone and called Karen Rothstein. It was past midnight, but she answered on the third ring like she'd been waiting for me. I need to talk about a plea deal, I said. The first, I need to tell you everything. The next morning, I was in Karen Rothstein's office before sunrise. She had coffee ready, black, no sugar, the kind of detail that told me she'd done this 1,000 times before. Prepared client, unprepared world. Here's what we're going to do, she said, sliding a legal pad across her desk. You cooperate fully with the FBI. You give them everything, the emails, the offshore accounts, all of it. In exchange, we negotiate immunity from prosecution. You're a victim and a witness, not a perpetrator. Will it work? I asked. It depends on how much leverage we have, Karen said. And right now, you have something David Chen doesn't expect. You have the complete financial blueprint of his operation. The SEC wants fraud prosecuted. The FBI wants money laundering shut down. If you hand them the whole structure on a silver platter, you become valuable. Very valuable. By 9 in the morning, I was in a federal building downtown with Detective Reeves and two other agents whose names I immediately forgot. We spent 14 hours going through everything. Every email, every account, every wire transfer. I brought my laptop, my phone, printed statements, anything that documented the theft. "This is comprehensive," one of the agents, Agent Morrison, I think, said around 8 p.m. "You've got dates, amounts, account numbers. This is prosecution-ready material." "I want them to pay," I said flatly. "All of them. Emma, David, Rebecca, everyone who touched this." "We'll see what we can do," Reeves said. She wasn't unkind, but she wasn't making promises either. The next day, Karen called me with news. "The SEC is offering you a deal. You cooperate, you testify, you're clear. No charges. But, and this is important, you're going to have to sit for a deposition. You're going to have to explain how you were so thoroughly manipulated. It's going to be uncomfortable." "I don't care," I said. "I want them prosecuted." "Good," Karen said, "because David Chen just lawyered up. Rebecca Chen, too. Emma's in the wind. We don't know where she is yet. But the money? We've traced $612,000 of the $847,000. It's frozen in offshore accounts pending the investigation." My chest loosened slightly. Not all of it, but more than half. 2 weeks later, I was in a deposition room, sitting across from David Chen's attorney. Karen was beside me. David himself was at the other end of the table, wearing an expensive suit and an expression of calculated calm. He looked exactly like his LinkedIn photo, respectable, unthreatening, the kind of guy who could convince you to hand him your life savings and thank him for the opportunity. "Mr. Harrison," his lawyer began, "you've been married to Ms. Emma Chen for approximately 3 years. In that time, did you not benefit from the financial arrangements she made?" "She stole from me," I said. "Did you not have access to the joint accounts? Did you not enjoy the lifestyle those accounts funded?" "She stole from me," I repeated, louder. Karen put her hand on my arm. A warning. "Stay calm. Don't give them ammunition." "Mr. Harrison, how would you characterize your relationship with your wife?" the lawyer continued. I looked directly at David Chen. "I'd characterize it as a con. A very well-executed con. And I'm not the only victim in this room." "Objection," David's lawyer said. "Argumentative." "Sustained," the judge said. But I'd made my point, and I could see something flicker across David's face, a moment of concern. He'd been so focused on the money that he hadn't considered what would happen when everything unraveled. What happened next came from the FBI, not from me. 3 weeks after the deposition, Reeves called. "We've got Emma," she said. "She was trying to board a flight to the Caymans using a fake passport. We picked her up in Miami." My hands shook when I heard that. Relief, anger, vindication. It all crashed through me at once. "There's something else," Reeves continued. "Rebecca Chen is cooperating. She's giving us everything on David." Turns out, she was tired of being his partner. Literally. She says he's been abusive for years. She's willing to testify against him in exchange for a reduced sentence. "What kind of sentence?" I asked. "We're looking at federal charges for money laundering, wire fraud, conspiracy. David Chen is probably looking at 10 to 15 years if it goes to trial. Rebecca might get 5 to 7. Emma," Reeves paused. "Emma's charges are more complex. She conspired with them, but she's also a victim of their operation in some ways. She was paid to marry you, but she was also controlled. She couldn't leave. She couldn't go to the police. She was trapped in her own crime." I didn't know how to feel about that. Part of me wanted her to suffer for what she'd done. Part of me, a small, uncomfortable part, understood that she'd been used too. "The trial is scheduled for next year," Reeves said. "We'll need you to testify." I'll be there, I said. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I sat in the witness stand for 2 of them, answering questions from prosecutors and defense attorneys. I described how Emma had seduced me, married me, and used my identity to facilitate theft. I described finding the emails, discovering the scam, realizing that the woman I'd trusted had been a con artist all along. David Chen took the stand and tried to paint himself as a legitimate businessman who'd made some questionable decisions. His lawyer argued that the offshore accounts were legal tax strategies, that the shell companies were standard practice, that he'd never explicitly told Emma to marry me. She'd done that of her own volition. But the emails told a different story. The evidence told a different story. The paper trail I'd preserved, the one David had been so careless about documenting, told a story of systematic, premeditated fraud. The jury deliberated for 4 days. On a Tuesday afternoon in March, they came back with a verdict. Guilty on all counts. David Chen's face went white. His lawyer's expression didn't change. They'd probably prepared for this. But David looked like someone had reached into his chest and pulled out his heart. He'd believed he was too smart to get caught, too careful, too good at what he did. He wasn't. Rebecca Chen had already taken a plea deal, and she was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. Emma, to my surprise, got 5 years. The prosecutor argued that she'd been the entry point for the fraud, that without her, David and Rebecca would never have had access to my accounts, that she deserved accountability. But in the courtroom that day, when the judge read her sentence, I saw something in her face that I'd never seen before. Actual remorse. Or maybe just the realization that she'd played a game she couldn't win. I didn't feel satisfied. That was the strange part. I thought I would. I thought seeing David Chen's face when the guilty verdict came in would feel like victory, but it just felt hollow. Karen helped me file a civil suit against David and Rebecca Chen's assets. We recovered another $235,000 from seized accounts. Combined with what the FBI had frozen, I got back approximately $847,000 of what had been stolen, the full amount. But here's what nobody tells you. Getting your money back doesn't give you your life back. Meridian Tech fired me, not because they thought I'd committed fraud, but because I'd become toxic. Every time my name appeared in the news, it was associated with financial crime. Clients didn't want to work with me. Colleagues avoided me at lunch. Within 6 months, they gave me a severance package and showed me the door. I took it without fighting. I was tired. For the next year, I didn't work. I sat in my colonial house, the one I'd paid off with my recovered money, and I tried to figure out who I was without the job, without the marriage, without the identity I'd built. My therapist, Dr. Patricia Mears, asked me one day, "What did you learn from this?" I didn't have a good answer for a long time. But eventually, I realized it wasn't about what I'd learned. It was about what I'd finally understood. I'd wanted to believe in something so badly that I'd ignored reality. I'd wanted to be loved so desperately that I'd overlooked the seams in the con. I'd wanted my life to be simple and good, and I'd been willing to blind myself to evidence that it wasn't. Emma had exploited that weakness, but she hadn't created it. Last month, I ran into Richard from Meridian at a coffee shop in Capitol Hill. He looked uncomfortable, but he sat down when I waved him over. "How are you?" he asked carefully. "I'm okay," I said. "I'm consulting now, small clients, nothing that requires me to be the guy on the letterhead. It's quieter. Better." "I'm sorry about how things ended," Richard said. "You did what you had to do," I said, and I meant it. Before he left, he asked, "Did you ever hear from her? Emma?" "No," I said. "She's in Alderson Federal Prison Camp in West Virginia. I don't think she wants to hear from me. And I don't think I want to hear from her." That was the truth. The anger had faded. What remained was a kind of sadness, not for what I'd lost, but for what I'd never had. The woman I thought I married had never existed. The marriage had been a transaction. But I was still here. My money was back. My freedom was intact. And I learned that the person most dangerous to me wasn't Emma or David Chen. It was the version of myself that had been so eager to believe.